On today's show, more on the surprising dismissal of Landry Fields in Atlanta and a revisiting of our preseason predictions, what we got right, what we got wrong, everything in between, and all that's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1959 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify on the audio side. It also includes YouTube on the video side, so please like this video as you're watching it, and be sure to tell your friends, family, etc. about this podcast. If you missed it, I did an emergency podcast on Monday evening, breaking down the surprising firing of Landry Fields on Monday. And this is the fourth show that we've done since Friday night when the Hawks were eliminated from the postseason. And later on in this podcast, I'm going to be going back through my preseason predictions that I made on the day of the season beginning back in October to see how we did on those. There were some wins, some losses, everything in between, as you might imagine. But first things first, some mailbag questions that are directed kind of on the fallout from the Hawks' big decision to relieve Landry Fields of his duties on Monday. And again, one more plug. I did a whole episode about it on Monday night. But these are just kind of some follow-ups to that, and I'm sure there are even more of those coming in the future that I'll be happy to answer and dig into even more. So mailbag style in this first segment, one set of questions. First one comes from Josh, who says, what do you think the team would have needed to do this season for Landry Fields to keep his job? And in related news, Steve asks, do you think Landry keeps his job if the Hawks don't lose in the play-in? So the simplest answer is that I don't for sure know on both counts. And it would be silly for me to assert that I do know. But in making some calls over the last 24 hours plus, my best educated guess that I don't think that getting into the playoffs would have saved Landry's job. Again, I don't know for sure, but I think this was coming down the pike for a little bit of time. For what I can gather, it was not a split-second decision basically from ownership and to move on from Landry at this point in time. Could that have changed if they had beaten the Cavs or the Celtics in a series? Maybe, but that'd be a pretty big upset and a pretty landmark occasion. I think it's hard to make a change after something like that. But on Josh's question, it might be different if they finish with the top 6 seed in the playoffs. And I do believe that was a realistic outcome until Jalen Johnson went down. But I said it on the day of that show, when Jalen got hurt and was announced he was going to miss the season, I said that most of the high ceiling, high-end outcomes for the Hawks were basically off the table at that point realistically. And that if you want to be cynical, you could say that when Jalen got hurt, that might have cost Landry his job. Obviously, that's not directly what it was, but some of that is maybe tied into each other because of the results. So I don't think there was a definite kind of you have to do this or else feeling with Landry at the end of the season. Maybe it made it a little bit easier PR-wise for ownership when they missed the playoffs, honestly. But if you think about it, I think you have to hope that just losing an overtime game to Miami on a Friday night was not the difference between keeping Landry and not keeping Landry, because zoom out 100 feet, that's insane. The Hawks could have easily won the game Friday night. And does that change your thought process of the entire organization? I would hope not if I'm a Hawks fan. So if it was something like that, I think that'd be bad process. But what I believe is that it was going to happen either way by the end of the year. I don't know when that decision was made, but I don't think it was that day. I don't think it was between exit interviews on Saturday and when it was announced on Monday, or any of that. I think they've probably known for a little bit of time, and nothing that happened at the end of the season kind of changed Tony's mind by the end. Question from Corey, who says, I know it looks like we have 2 picks now, but who is going to make those 2 picks? So a good question here, obviously. At the moment, Ansi Sala is the head of basketball operations. As the general manager, he's been elevated to that job. So until and unless that changes, the assumption would be he's the number one guy on the decision-making tree for basketball stuff, on making a draft pick or a signing or a trade or whatever. Obviously, it is still going to be a collaborative process, but he is in the chair right now and would have the credit or the heat based on how any deal goes, just like Landry had. Landry was the top person on the chain, and that even if it's not always that person's call by themselves, they are the one that has the responsibility and will go down in the annals as being the person who makes that decision. Some picks, like number one overall last year, for instance, rise to the ownership level very obviously to a different degree of visibility, but probably that won't be the case as much with picks outside the top 10. Those are more of these sicko selections, and I mean that endearingly because I love this kind of stuff, but they're more like basketball decisions than they are like organizational ones at number 1 overall, for example, or top 5 picks. Also, this is a different group now, but they've had some hit and misses in the last couple of years in the first round. Obviously, Jalen Johnson a few years ago was a grand slam at 20. AJ Griffin did not go very well, but there's a debate on how much of that you can blame the Hawks for. He was good as a rookie and then just kind of decided he didn't want to play basketball anymore. Is that the team's fault? I don't really know. To each their own on that. Obviously, Kobe Buffkin's kind of a TBD. It's not gone great with injuries, but the talent level is real for what it was. Obviously, the Mo Gay pick looks pretty decent right now. Ricochet had a really good season, so like it's been up and down, but nothing terrible by any means in the first round. But long story short, we will see. But unless they hire a president pretty soon, Auntie Salah is the guy that will be tasked with running the show and the process through the draft, workouts, scouting, and all of that stuff, and then leading into picks being made in June. So TBD, but right now it's Auntie making the pick if you had to choose at this moment. This is kind of a combined question. Listeners named Lyndon, Julian, Josh, and Ken all functionally asked kind of the same question, and essentially was whether firing Landry and hiring a new president would make it more likely or less likely that the Hawks would kind of be more inclined to make a big kind of splash move this summer. And Arthur asked, is it right to say that it was already a big summer for the Hawks and now that is even bigger? So this is kind of putting these two together. I would say, broadly speaking, you would say, yes, it is likely to be, or at least potentially to be a bigger summer now than it was before. And maybe I should have mentioned this a little bit more on the show on Monday night. It was already a pivotal summer for the Hawks, which I've said a lot already, pre-Landry. You had things that were going to happen for obvious reasons, like Trae Young extension talks. Next steps there, obviously really important this summer. The Hawks, with their deadline moves, trading DeAndre Hunter in particular, created flexibility. That was one big reason why they made the DeAndre Hunter trade in particular, was for flexibility for the future, which means it was kind of a TBD evaluation until you saw what they did this summer. And that's still kind of lingering out there. Dyson Daniels is extension eligible. That's a big decision. And the realities of committing to this core as it kind of is right now. So those are just 3 or 4 things, but it's definitely a big summer already. And then you throw in the potential, and I want to stress it's just potential, that ownership might want to make a bigger splash to kind of speed things up right now. That would be, I haven't heard that, but if you go by what Tony's done in the past, he's done that MO before. And that puts more of a spotlight on things. After a couple of early exits, the tone in the release was they mentioned that they missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. As much as I have said repeatedly that I believe it was a step forward this year, if you want to be cynical and just say they missed the playoffs, people are like, I get that. There's some important context there, but they did miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. And if you're ownership, you might be impatient on that level. So if you did want to make a big move for an established talent who makes a lot of money, it kind of needs to happen this year in some respects because Dyson hasn't made a lot of money yet, and he will moving forward, probably starting the following season. The Trae Young piece of it, Ricochet is still cost controlled for a while, as is the Kongwu. Like they have some kind of a window. Now. I won't say it's definitely has to be now, but financially even, salary cap, luxury tax, planning reasons, if there was going to be a big move, a big addition, it kind of makes sense for it to be this summer. So through all that, like the last time there was a major shakeup with this Hawks team, it ended up being a major swing on DeJounte Murray. And I know they didn't fire Travis before that, but it was an ownership level move. Clearly, ownership and other forces move. And that's kind of similar, not exactly the same, but kind of similar to what you're looking at right now when you just clean house at the top. So I think when you infuse uncertainty into a front office, it can lead toward bigger action because it might signal that Tony Ressler wants the Hawks to just do something bigger and better. Landry was definitely more of a process person, more of a stressing patience, not like overwhelming patience, but certainly that was a talking point. They wanted to go through the whole process, build culture, all those things. Tony might be ready to speed it up a little bit. That's a might, but still that kind of logically makes sense of what his history is. So that's his rep as an owner. Honestly, it's a fair one that he's earned, I think. Even when the Hawks were full-on rebuilding early in the Trae era, Tony, by all accounts, pushed them to speed up a little bit, and they spent a lot of money on guys like Gallinari and Bogdanovich, and that ended up kind of working, obviously. They made the conference finals, in part because of those moves, but they also, consensus-wise, like ownership got impatient and it didn't kill them, but they did speed up faster than many thought that they probably should at that point in time. That could be happening again. I don't know if it is, but it could be. Does that mean they're going to trade for Zion this summer or Kevin Durant this summer? Like, no, it doesn't mean that. But I think that I said this on a previous show, but having different voices now means that everything is less certain. Everything when it comes to the roster building. That means Quinn status. That means Trey status. That means supporting guys, investments in all the guys they already have on the roster. Willingness to kind of push ships in now to try to win more in the meantime than it is in the future and all of that. So long story short, I would say, yeah, I think it certainly adds a little bit more of a spotlight this summer. It was already going to be a spotlight summer after last year was definitely more of a, all right, let's chill out a little bit. Let's retool, look to the future. Doing that again does not seem to be what Tony wants to do. And I think moving on from Landry is a signal of that. So that means buckle up, I would say. I don't know what's going to be. It might just be more margin stuff. But I think that after not doing anything last summer that was present facing, this year they're going to have to do some stuff. I shouldn't say have to, but probably will do some stuff that's present facing because there's a little bit of a window. And look, it's wide open. This is a different podcast. But if you look at the landscape in the East right now, there are really only two teams in the East this year that were on a totally different level than the rest, Boston and Cleveland. It would not be crazy if you were the Hawks to look at the roster and say, if we do a couple things, you could be in the mix for the 3 seed next year. It's not crazy to say. Doesn't mean it's going to happen or that it definitely will happen or any of that stuff, but that's a reasonable viewpoint if you push chips in and improve your roster. So is that what they're doing? Who knows? But certainly the spotlight is a little bit brighter on the team overall based on this move to move on from Landry and where they are roster-wise, and of course the reported and announced pursuit of a president of basketball operations. So we'll see what they do on that front. All right, much more to come, I promise you, in the future on this podcast when it comes to the fallout, president of basketball operations, potential interviews, rumors, directional stuff. But for the rest of this show, I'll be diving into my preseason predictions that I made on this podcast on the day the season began. There were some hits, there were some misses, everything in between. We'll get to all that and more in just one moment. This show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like an atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, I can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting at all. Gametime actually makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals save up 6%. That's 60% savings potentially with Gametime. I love using the Gametime app for many different reasons. One, of course, is last-minute deals. Save big on last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And they have seat views before you buy them, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee. With all that, you can book with total confidence at Gametime. The lowest price guarantee also means I never worry about overpaying. That's a huge thing, of course. And you can take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that code is LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, this is kind of a fun exercise that I was going to do actually earlier this week, and then it was put on hold a little bit for Landry purposes, but I've already done the research. I wanted to pass it along to you in this kind of mid period between the big news and whatever and what's coming next for the Hawks, all that stuff. Basically, I had a listener bring up to me that they wanted to be unnamed, so I'm going to unname them. But basically said, hey, you should go back and listen to your predictions and what you got right, what you got wrong. And they apparently did that before I even did. So I did a podcast, as I almost always do every season, on the day of the opener, essentially. And the second half of the show was basically me giving predictions. Some of them were hot takes. Some of them were not hot takes, just predictions of what was going to happen to varying degrees. So I'm going to go through this in the order that I actually shared them on the podcast. They're not like prioritized. It's actually how I listed them on the show. And I'll kind of grade them, wins, losses, etc. So first one I said, I don't know how I got the order here, but first one I said was that Zachary Ricochet will start more games this season than DeAndre Hunter. That one ended up being correct by a lot. Ended up being 43 starts to 4 starts in favor of Ricochet until the point where Hunter was traded, and then Ricochet kept starting, so it was even more lopsided. Hilariously, Hunter did start the opener. We didn't know that was going to happen. I thought it might happen back then, but Ricochet I thought was going to be starting at some point in the season for the rest of the year, and that obviously happened. Hunter was obviously good for the Hawks this year and had a 6-man of the year case when he was traded, But it seems like this is the most likely outcome that was going to happen was that they were going to invest in Ricochet with minutes. There was a chance that Hunter was going to come off the bench as he ended up doing. And all that means that I was right on that one. We're 1 for 1. The next one was Jalen Johnson will average 20 points per game, and it will be understood that he would have been a max player or close to it in free agency if he did not sign an extension. So this is kind of an interesting grading because he didn't quite get to 20 points per game. He averaged 19, 10, and 5 and was one of 4 players in the whole league to do that. But, of course, he got hurt, all that stuff. The second part of this is subjective, but I think the spirit of it's right in that even with the injury midseason, I think if Jalen was a free agent this summer, restricted, he would get the max, the rookie max, or close to it, which I think is what I said. I would say that I was right about that, honestly. I think he would almost certainly get more than he got in an extension, which is all that matters if you're the Hawks. What you want to do if you were the team side on an extension negotiation for a rookie scale player is that you don't sign it unless it's going to be a team-friendly deal for you in the future. And that Jalen Johnson deal looks like a team-friendly deal. That looks like a good deal for the Hawks. Obviously, Jalen got security long-term, win-win, and I feel good about that one. Now, this next one I got very, very wrong. It was broad on purpose, but it was funny. I said that David Roddy would help the Hawks this year. That was incorrect. Now, I don't want to be mean to David Roddy. I like him personally in my interactions with him, but he was the most destructive player for the Hawks this year, on-off split-wise. Like, he was quite bad when he played. Part of that was not his fault. He was in some bad spots, but he was a bad player, unfortunately, for Atlanta this year. Now, I did say on the podcast he was going to be like the 13th man, so it wasn't like he was going to be a huge part of the team, but he did end up playing, but he didn't help them. He made the team worse at the time. He isn't worse. He's not here anymore, of course. I won't pile on, but it didn't go well, and that was a miss for me. Now, next one. Dyson Daniels will be third on the team in minutes behind Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. This was correct. Actually, he finished second in total minutes behind only Trae because Jalen got hurt. But Dyson was exactly third in minutes behind Trae and Jalen this season in minutes per game. That wasn't a super hot take, but it certainly wasn't an established thing. People have kind of forgotten this. Dating back to October, it was not a lot that Dyson was even going to start. I thought he was going to start. I was confident he was going to start, but it wasn't like they announced that day one of the season. So that was somewhat informed why I said that. This next one is one of the hottest takes and honestly probably my best call of the entire preseason. And it was Dyson Daniels will make at least second team all defense. Now, people kind of forgotten this. This was very spicy, and it's going to be right, I'm pretty sure, at this point in time. As a reminder, he played 22 minutes a game as a bench guy the previous year for the Pelicans. And with the way that all defense is now positionless, it's going to skew more towards bigs than guards. So you have to be awesome to be a guard and make one of the two all-defensive teams. And that, of course, I think is going to happen. It will shock me if it doesn't happen. I think he's going to be first team, honestly. But if he's not at least second team, I will go crazy on the podcast. But I called my shot on this one, honestly. I'm wrong sometimes, but this is what I'm very right about. Him being an awesome defender right away. It came through. Now, I will admit, I didn't see him average three steals a game because that's crazy. No one does that for 30 years, but he did it this year. And just generally speaking, even beyond the steals, he was awesome right away from day one and kept being awesome and helped to change the culture of the defense. So shout out to Dyson, and that was one that I was right on for sure. Now, this is one where it's I got it wrong, technically. I said the Hawks are going to be league average or better defensively as a team this season. I lost that one for sure. In my defense, the day that Jalen went down, they had a 113.4 defensive rating for the season. If that number held, and that's a big if, they would have been 15th, exactly league average. It didn't hold because they got worse. Personnel-wise, no Jalen, no Capella at the end of the year, playing more Barlow. That was not going to be able to play more Niang. Like, that wasn't going to hold up. But I was wrong. They did improve defensively, which is kind of the point of the projection. It's been lost in some circles. Like, I saw a lot of people like frustratedly yelling about the defense this year, even when they were very obviously improved. The Hawks were 18th in defense this year. Now, that's not great. Trust me, I get it. But the previous years, they were 27th, 22nd, and 26th. So they were meaningfully better defensively this year than they had been in a long time. And that does matter. Even if I was wrong about this projection, there was a potential for them getting there. It might have gotten there with Jalen on the roster, and they only barely missed it, honestly. Two more, and then we'll get to a break. One was that Quinn Snyder will finish top 5 in Coach of the Year. That's going to be a loss, I'm pretty sure. I haven't heard Quinn buzz really at all. I think Quinn should get some credit for the defensive side of the floor improving and the shot profile improving and lots of process stuff, but the wins didn't follow. They probably needed to win like 45 games to get to Quinn being a legitimately top 5 candidate for Coach of the Year this year. So that's a miss. Not a crazy one, but a miss. And then one more before we get to break. Dom Barlow will be in the rotation on multiple occasions this season. Now, that definitely happened, so I was right. Dom was on a 2-way contract and was a 20-year-old guy when he was signed, so a raw kind of project-y 2-way contract. I love that deal. Barlow, by the way, was in the rotation about 20 times this year. He played 10 minutes or more like 15 times. He made 4 starts for the team, so this is obviously correct. It didn't always go well, to be fair. He's very young, and he was very, very overstretched by the end. Even I, as a Dom Barlow enthusiast early in the season, would have told you, like, you don't want Dom Barlow playing crunch time minutes and playing rotation minutes in, like, high-level games at 21 years old. But because of the injuries to Jalen, Clint, and Larry, he had to play some. It didn't go great, but I still liked Dom. And I thought, but the big thing was, I thought he was going to play at some point, and because of just depth purposes, and he ended up playing quite a bit, to be honest. Okay, there are probably 8 or 9 more of these to get to in a second, including a couple more that I missed on. If you'd like to see me fail, I have a couple more of those, plus some stuff I got right, and more of that's coming up in just one moment. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your pure controller, subscriber sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you can stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Fire TV, gaming is affordable and portable. You can play your high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. And if you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your games wherever you plug in. Also, there's endless entertainment with Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max for 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, and some more predictions revisited here. We'll dive back in with one that I said the Hawks were going to trade either Capella or Nance by the deadline, and I was wrong about that. They definitely tried to trade Capella, or at least looked at it, but they didn't do that, so it's a loss for me. Unfortunately, they kept those guys in part because they wanted to keep winning games, and they played a total of 13 games and 230-ish minutes after the deadline because they got hurt. Bad luck there. Obviously, that hurt them, having to play Dom, having to play some minutes they didn't want, really small. That hurt them, but ultimately, I was wrong about the prediction, so I have to own that one. This one's kind of funny. I said Clint Capella would start the most games of any player on the roster at center. And technically, I was right. Now, it's funny because Okongwu took over midseason and was the guy for almost half the year. But in the end, Capella made 41 starts and Okongwu made 40 starts. And the only reason why I wasn't perfectly 41-41 is because Okongwu sat out the final game of the year for rest purposes. So it basically was a tie, even though I kind of won. I did think and said that on the podcast that Okongwu would probably, or maybe take over during the season, but it would probably happen late if it was going to happen. Like maybe they would trade Clint, for instance, at the deadline. They didn't do that, but they went to Okongwu before that. He obviously played very well. I was the spirit of that one. I was right on the prediction. I thought Okongwu would probably play less than he actually did, and Okongwu, to his credit, vastly outplayed Capella this year. So obviously, that moving in that direction was the right decision. But I technically got that one right, even though it was very, very close to being wrong. Here's one. Trae Young will increase his assists per game again, average 11 per game or more, and lead the NBA in assists per game. Well, I nailed that one across the board. He did all those things. He has a streak now of every single season in the NBA increasing his assist average, and it gets harder and harder every time because it's so high. But he did it again this year. He averaged 11.6. That's over 11 and his career high. And he led the league comfortably in assists per game by more than 1 per game. and by 164 total assists. So Trey was the best passing guard in the league this year, bar none. Bar none. He was fantastic. He had a great year passing the ball and somehow hit all those benchmarks. So I was right about that one. I said Jalen Johnson will not make the All-Star team, but he will be on a bunch of snubs lists. And I think that's pretty much happened. Now, he wasn't going to make it, but he was at least talked about in a lot of circles as a fringe all-star contender pre-injury, right until the day he got hurt, basically. Again, he wasn't going to make it, I don't think, but he was the spirit of that was pretty much right on. Again, he averaged 19, 10, and 5. It went pretty well. I said Trae Young will make an all-star team and all-NBA. All-star he did make. It was a commissioner's exemption. Should have been easier than that, but he made it. If I had to guess right now, he won't make all-NBA, so I'll be wrong about this. It's a non-zero chance that he does, but I think he probably won't, so I'll be wrong narrowly. But I think the spirit of that, again, Trey was very good this year, even with not the greatest efficiency season in the world. I did a separate segment on FanDuel bets that I like, because FanDuel is a sponsor of our podcast. Want to go through some stuff there. One that I said was that the Hawks were a great value to win the Southeast Division at 8-1 or even higher. They didn't win it, but I will go to my grave saying that was a really, really, really good bet. The Hawks were winning the division late into the season, even with Jalen out. And I think they would have won it if Jalen hadn't gotten hurt. Now you still lost the bet, so the money doesn't count. It is what it is. But that was a pretty good process bet, I think. I said Ricochet was a good bet, 8-1 or higher to win Rookie of the Year. My guess that he won't win, honestly. But getting 8-1, 9-1, 10-1 on a guy who was a finalist, a top 3 vote getter at the very least, is probably a pretty good process, and he had a good season. And then the one that I like the absolute most, and I said that a lot on that podcast over and over again, is that I liked the Hawks win total over. And if you missed it, during the summer, it went from 34.5 to 35.5, 36.5. And I still like the over and over all year long. And they ended up getting there comfortably at 40 wins. And they won it, again, even with Jalen going down and without a backup center for the last 2 months of the season. So pretty good process stuff. I love that bet. I said it many times. Hopefully anyone who is allowed to legally bet was able to follow that along and win that one. But that one was good. Now, the last thing I'll say before we sign off the predictions and a revisited rundown of all of the things I said in October is that I, on the final show, picked 42 wins for the Hawks. That was a little bit too high. Now, on Nate Duncan's show that I guest on each year, I actually said 40. So I ended up being perfect on that one. And it was, but that was earlier. That was actually back, I think it was in September maybe that I did that show. But during training camp, I saw Dyson, I saw Jalen, I saw Ricochet, and I was like, you know what? 42 wins. I was wrong technically because they didn't quite get there. But I also said definitively on that show they would win more games than last year, despite the national consensus saying they wouldn't. Because that was, people keep forgetting that the Hawks were picked to win 35 to 36 games this year. They were picked 9th or 10th in all the projections that I've seen, basically. And the Hawks didn't get to 42, but they won more than last year. They got to 40. And again, Jalen played 36 games. If you told me that, I would have gone back down to like 37, 38 probably. If you said Jalen's going to play half a season, that would have been a lot of wins that you probably cost yourself. So I was wrong technically on the win total, but not kind of directionally correct. And I also said in the projection that I had them in the 7 or 8 range, but I did say they make the playoffs. I was wrong about that. They lost in the play-in, but they were underdogs to make the playoffs at the time. And I said, wouldn't be a bad value there. If they got to the play-in and you had that plus money, maybe you hedged and got out of that. Regardless, I think I did pretty well. Obviously, there's some that I got wrong. David Roddy, the trade thing with Capella and Nance, etc. I'm always going to miss stuff, but I think generally speaking, directionally, it was pretty good. And hopefully I won't be any worse next year, and we'll always keep doing this in some form or fashion. I have a note now in my notes about podcast planning to kind of not only do the projections, which I always do, but also to go back and look at them and see how I did at the end of the year. So a fun thing there in the middle of late April, and much more to come, obviously, with a lot more guests. And when it comes to, award stuff's going to be happening in the near future. We got fallout from the president of basketball operations, potential hire interview process. What are the Hawks going to do in the draft? It's all coming up right now. So that's going to put a bow on this season. Technically, from a prediction standpoint, I will have player capsules looking back at the season with an eye toward the future on all the players, how they all performed. Some guests on talk about how the season went, broadly speaking, even at the end of the year, process stuff, takeaways, etc. There's more of that coming, but a fun exercise. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And one PSA. The NBA has already announced when they're going to announce some awards, not all of them, but one of the 3 that the Hawks have a finalist in is Defensive Player of the Year. And that's going to be announced on Thursday, this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And the finalists are Dyson Daniels, Draymond Green, Evan Mobley. If I had to guess, Dyson will not win. But he has a chance to win. There's a groundswell of positivity on Dyson, as there should be. He's been awesome this year. If he wins, we'll talk about it. If he loses, I'll talk about it as well. But just as a PSA, that's coming on the schedule on Thursday night. In the meantime, I don't know when my next show is going to be. It will be at the very latest Thursday night, but it may not be Wednesday night. We'll see. I'm trying to get a guest on, trying to align those things, schedules, all that stuff, and also my own schedule. But please stay tuned. This is our 3rd show this week. We'll have at least 1 more, probably 2 more later this week, and then we'll be rocking and rolling 4 or 5 times a week until the draft, until free agency, until summer league. And then we really didn't slow down at all until like mid-July. And even then, we're still rocking and rolling every week on the podcast. So please go ahead and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And please follow my non-podcast work about the Hawks and Atlanta sports at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Listen to this podcast, and we'll see you all next time.